Years ago, my mother told me about her uncle who came out here. He was deer hunting. He'd park over by Coveport and he'd hike out west of Coveport. We don't know exactly where he was, but we get a general idea from the story that he told and that she passed along to me, that he was out here deer hunting, and he decided it was starting to get late, plus he could see some big clouds coming in, and he decided it time to get back to the truck. So he starts hiking back in, and he gets overtaken by the storm, and it's snowing like crazy. And so he gets up against one of these lava ledges out here and tucks himself up behind a tree, and there was a hole, and he decided, I'm gonna get a little warmer, and he tucks himself back into this little cave. And he starts grabbing some of the dry wood and breaking it up, gonna make himself a little fire. And once he gets that going, he looks back in the back of this little cave, and there's these bricks stacked up. And he slides back in there and grabs hold of one, and it just slipped out of his finger because it's so heavy. And turns out they were gold bars. So the whole time he's sitting there waiting for the storm to pass by, he's trying to decide whether he's going to take his gun or take one of the bars. And he ends up deciding to take his gun. And he comes outside after the storm, and he looks the area over real good, and he's absolutely convinced he can find his way back. So he takes off back and gets in his truck and goes home. About a week later, comes back out, brings his kid with him, who is the guy that I ended up calling later in years. But anyway, they could never find it again. And I got in touch with his son before he passed away. He was in his 80s, I think, when I talked to him, and I relayed the story to him, and I says, have you ever heard that story? And he says, no, I haven't. He says, but it makes perfect sense. And I says, why is that? And he said, well, my dad used to take us down to Coveport every chance we got. And we would walk up and down those ledges looking for caves. And he says, and one day I asked my dad, Dad, what are we looking for in these caves? He said, son, he says, in one of these caves, there's a certain kind of rock, and that's what we're looking for. He says, I never knew that. He said he'd never told anybody. But anyhow, that's right out here. It's, he said, west of Coveport, and the Paiutes say that the 80-pound bars are located in a cave north of the volcano. And so...
Where's the volcano?
Right there.
Do you think it's possible that when they did the highway, the interstate, because at that time, 89 was the only highway.
You know me. I went and pulled out all the old recon photos from the 30s and the 50s. Yeah. There were no ledges where I-15 is.
Because, there's that one monument over there.
Yeah.
But you can drive down the highway.
Well, that brings us to why we're here. Okay. Personally, I think there's a high probability that the bars that were in that cave probably came from the cache site out here. We highly...
They were staged or something?
Huh?
Like they were staged?
Like
to be able to grab them quick and go?
I think they were on their way out of here and got caught by the Indians.
Oh, the Indians.
Got killed, and the Indians threw them in the cave.
That makes sense.
It makes more sense.
Right.
Back in 1975, a friend of mine and I decided we were going to drive the brand new I-15 all the way to St. George. And so we headed on down. And as we drove past Coveport, looked off to the left, and there's a big old monument sticking up. And at least another 30 years went by before anybody ever stopped. In fact, I didn't know what it was. I just saw it as a big monument. Well, I finally had a friend of mine stop because I drove past it, once again, and I thought, it's time to find out what it is. And so I sent my buddy over, who turned out not to be much of a buddy. And anyway, that's where this all began. So we went to that monument and examined it, looked for anything that would indicate a direction or what to do next. And the guys that I were with, and I'm not going to mention their names, are so-called professionals, okay? At least back in the day, that's what I thought they were. And they got their own ideas in their head and started chasing after, you know, little pointer rocks sticking up or a rock on top of another rock, and somehow I just knew that's not what we're looking for. And one of them actually got a little belligerent with me one day, and I said, look, why don't you just go do what you're doing and I'll go do what I'm doing. And so two of my buddies went with me, and they got in the truck and they said, where we got to go? I said, we need to go over to the west side of the volcano. And they said, what are we looking for? And I said, anything, probably a monument. And that's when we finally made our way in here and spotted this monument. Once we found this monument, it would be another, I'll bet you 10, 11 years, 12 years before we ever realized it's a turtle. Because we didn't know what to look for. We'd never seen a turtle monument, but we had heard about what they're supposed to be. And there's some truth in it, but it just isn't what we were taught by the so-called experts.
What validates this site, Dan, at least in my own mind, is my grandfather mined up here in the Kimberley. He had some mines up on the Kimberley.
Up above
so there's known gold sources and silver in that area. We've known for years. Then over here you've got the old Spanish
Fillmore and
mine.
Kanosh. Yeah.
And so this is, if you, even today, this is where the road, the highways, the interstates split.
Right.
So it would have been a good spot if we were coming from the Price, Uintas, or from the valley. Everything comes together.
There were four known trails that came together over by the main monument.
Right.
Okay, we had the monument that went to the west, or the trail that went to the west. Of course, the one to the now. I-15 basically follows an old Spanish trail.
Right.
Okay, and then you had the one that went east up the canyon. But anyway, and then out to the west, there's dozens and dozens of monument sites out there. Whether they're Spanish or not, I don't know. I've got 60 coordinates to go out and check sometime, and I just never get time to do it.
Are those the ones that you were talking to me about?
Yes.
The Delta we need to go map out?
Yep. I need someone to go to each of those and take photographs all the way around the monument with at least 3 feet of the dirt around them. And that way I can look for whether it's a turtle or not. I know there's got to be at least, out of 60 monuments, there's got to be at least one more cache site out there. I'm sure of it. If this one's what I think it is, it's what we would call a depository. Okay? I don't mind much doing this on camera. There are a few things I might have Terry and whoever else has got a camera clip out, just because it all comes down to one individual that just doesn't need to know. Because quite frankly, even if you showed him, I don't think he could find his butt if you lit it on fire.
So you're saying I gotta go home?
I'll let you know. So let's go up and take a look at the monument. And part of the reason for this is to train Joshua. Okay, because Joshua is the guy that's going to be going to some places that I just can't. I mean, I could get there, but it would take me all day and I'd be beat by the end of the day as it is. So
you want to beat me by the end of the day.
Exactly. You know, he's expendable.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, you're going to go with him, aren't you? When we first found this monument, incidentally, the guys that I told you about, the so-called experts, I've never told them about any of this, none of it. There's a lot of things that we discovered here over the next 11 to 12 years trying to figure out how the Spanish did their cache configurations. I mean, all we had to go on is what the so-called experts told us. And much of it is, it's just not, it's not so. I want you to notice in this monument, notice the calcite you see here. There's very little of it. Okay, most of the rocks you can see where the calcite used to be in these lighter areas. That's about the only way you can tell that these rocks have been here for a long time. If you look out here, you'll see a lot of rocks that have been overturned with calcite on them. On our way over to the next monument site, you're going to see some BLM markers. And the dates on them are about 1900, 1910, somewhere in there, and they've used some of those rocks. And the calcite is still on every one of them. So you know that within 100 years, the calcite's still going to be there. So that's one of the ways where you can kind of tell the age of these monuments. Spaniards built solid monuments, whereas this one is so big around, I'll bet you it's a good, 4 feet, 5 feet in diameter. Balance isn't really an issue. When you see some of the taller monuments, you'll see what I'm saying when I tell you they would put little rocks in to stabilize it. And you can walk up and hit the monument thinking it's going to sway back and forth, and it won't budge. You can always tell, almost always tell, the difference between a mining claim marker and you remember the one down on the Arizona Strip that was up above the, there was a cabin there, and we would have sworn it was a Spanish marker, and when we get up there, you know, you could tell just by the way it was built that it wasn't Spanish. The only thing that we knew here is my two buddies asked me, well, what do we do now? And I says, you look for another monument. And, you know, well, where do we look? And I says, you got to look out on the horizon. Somewhere out there, there's a monument sticking up somewhere, and you got to find it. And we probably spent 10, 15 minutes just looking this whole area over, trying to find anything. Finally, we got out the binoculars, and I finally spotted it. Once I spotted it, then I could put the binoculars down and I could see it, okay? And as you'll see, it'll take me a minute to find it today. Pretty sure that's it right there. Okay, do you see where that mountain comes down and then it starts to slope and comes out?
Oh, I see it.
Right where it's sloping, you can see something poking up.
Yeah, I see it.
See it?
Uh-huh.
Can you see it?
See, my eyes are only 12 years old today.
Any of you guys see it?
I know where it's at. But
Kind
I
of a
can't
dark
see it.
spot, a little nipple thing.
Just a little teeny thing sticking straight up, and it's right.
Right in the kind of.
See where the two mountains back there come together?
Yeah. It's on
Almost, well, below it and to the right. And it's on top of a grassy hill.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, that's it, all right? But we could tell probably with binoculars that it was standing up.
Mine.
It turns out it's about this tall, and it's probably about this big around. It has a sight window, and it is also a turtle. Now, we didn't know that this was a turtle monument until years later. Let me show you what makes this a turtle.
Where was the sight window looking at, in your opinion? I mean, there's two ways you could look.
Up to the mining areas.
Up on that hillside over there.
That monument, which we call the North Reference Monument, okay? We'll get into that later. It serves two purposes. One, it identifies where the mining was taking place. And two, it serves as the corner of the triangulation or triangle that makes this a cache configuration. The actual cache configuration isn't until you get to the center, but we'll get to that. Okay, before we're done here, you're going to see that this whole configuration is designed to get you to one specific spot, okay? Out of 6 of the monument sites or cache sites that we believe are cache sites that use the rule of Martillo, this is the only one that added an extra bonus into it to where we have triangulation from 3 points, not 2. Okay, to me that kind of insinuates the importance of the site itself. And I think that there's something else that I have yet to show you at this site that will help add to that. Terry, you're going to want to bring the camera over here. Now, we really didn't know what to look for until about 11 or 12 years afterwards. If this monument was not intended to be a turtle, the Spanish would have removed any rock that gave it that appearance, okay? Because they understand that the turtle has a specific meaning and it's leading to wealth. That's the best way I can put it. You see that rock there? This serves as the turtle's head, okay? I was told for years that there would be legs and that the legs would tell you which way to go. And I'm here to tell you that out of the roughly dozen turtles that I've seen to this date, none of them have legs. Okay? It's probably something that you would find on a tree carving, but not a monument. I mean, I could sit here all day, I could put my Kenworthy glasses on, and I could probably find legs and so forth, but I'm telling you, they weren't supposed to be here.
So what about then, if it had no legs, that means no movement, the treasure's here? You're saying that...
Oh, shit! Oh, sorry, I'm allergic to BS. Okay, that's the turtle's head. That's what was intended to be the turtle's head. Now, how do you confirm that? There's only one way. On the exact opposite end, somewhere, either at the base of the monument or built within the monument, you're going to find a nice pointed tail.
In other words, the north end of a southbound turtle.
Yes. Now, I would really much rather had it been down here, but I've seen probably 3 or 4, one particular one's down on the strip that you know about.
Yeah.
In fact, you're the one that found it. There's your pointed tail. Now, could this be my imagination? Oh, hell yeah. Okay? I mean, come on, I've been talking to Kenworthy people for a long time. I know what the imagination can do. But if it is a turtle, then the intent is to follow the head. And if you take a bead on that head, it's going to send you in that direction at 120, opposite of 120, 300 degrees. Does that number ring a bell with anybody?
In other words, you're going to
Spaniards like threes. Huh?
In other words, you're going to run into that next monument down there.
Well, when we were standing here, the first time we found it, and we finally spotted that one out there, before we left, I says, guys, you're missing something. Is there anything else you can see? And they're looking around, and I said, do you notice this pile of rocks right down here? You can't hardly see it, can you? In fact, I'm not even sure I can see it. But if you walk down to those rocks right there, you're going to find a square monument. It's only about that high, but it's square, okay? No question. It's roughly 280 yards, if I remember right. Anyhow, but it's in direct line with the turtle's head, but that's not all that's in direct line with the turtle's head. The next, in my opinion, intended rock or monument, we should say, is down at the cache site, and we'll get to that one. And I wish I had the monument numbers with me, because then, Joshua, you'd be able to make better reference. But anyway, any of you that want to go look at it, it's just right there where those dark rocks are. There's a square monument, and it's about that tall, okay? So we took note of all of this and eventually came back and pulled the measurements off of it. Because when you're using the rule of Martillo, you've got to have what's called an alargar. And I'm not going to go into the description of that. Just go look up the rule of Martillo, go find the alargar, and you'll know what it is.
But things like that kind of take out of consideration that this was placed by sheep herders or
yes,
or recreationists
not
trying
to
to make a monument.
Not to mention the absence, like right here, should be covered with calcite. This should be covered with calcite. That, this. I mean, we do have a couple here that still got some on it, but
Sheep herders wouldn't be putting in little square monuments and triangulation and all that. It's not like they
right.
can't look at the various points and say, well, that's where I lost the sheep last time, and I,
You know, there is some validity to the sheep herder monument thing, okay? Right. But you can't use it as a cop-out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like handing a guy a beautiful map that shows him where an old Spanish mine is. It's got a cache in it, and it's a wonderful map, and you hand it to him. And so he takes off, and he goes up to the area, and he gets up there, and he gets out of his truck and closes his door and starts looking around him, seeing how vast the area is, and all the trees and the mountains. And he looks around, and he looks at the map, and he says, well, what if they've already found it? And he gets in his truck and drives off. He's done, okay? That's where the sheep herder excuse comes into play. Yes, it could have been built by sheep herders, okay? And I'm not going to say there's a high probability. I'm going to say there's a very, very low probability, okay? Based on everything we found out about the site so far. Anyway, so suffice it to say that we have a small square monument right out there. We later found out that's the alargar, because we couldn't figure out, once we found what we call the cash turtle, we knew there had to be an alargar, but we couldn't find it. And so we found ourselves doing what the so-called experts did on this project, and we were looking at little rocks sticking up, little pointed rocks. And one day I just looked at it and I said, no, this is not it. This can't be. You know, we're doing the same thing they were doing. And so I quit. And I went home, I laid it all out again, and started all over. And the first thing I had to do was figure out which monument was intended to be visited first, and that would be this one. So as you follow the monuments, you have to gather your information, because that information is going to be needed when you are plotting out the angles for the rule of Martillo in order to find that one given spot. Now, you asked earlier, and I don't think I answered, that one given spot. Every exploration leader that was up here in this whole area of what was then known as New Mexico, every one of them knew the rule of Martillo. So how do you stop your competitors, your land pirates? How do you stop them from taking from your site that you created? And the only way you can do it is you got to have one final measurement that's only in the expedition leader's head. And that's the only thing we can figure out. Because I'm telling you, we dug a 20-foot hole.
Or possibly like what, if you had a big enough group of men, you know, you look at the Oak Island thing or some of these other things, if you had a big enough group of men and put the thing in the ground deep enough, that would preclude an individual from...
Well, we're thinking that because we are on top of a huge lava field, that it's got to be in a cavern. Okay, it's got to be. So you've got to look for places such as this where the hill has raised up. 9 times out of 10, a hill like this that just appears right in the middle of a lava field, chances are the lava flowed over a spring of water or a pool or something, and all that steam creates a big bubble. Okay, it's going to create a cavern. Some of those bubbles will pop, and then you have a crater. We don't have craters around here. You do find them down on the strip. Around here, they're mostly bubbles, okay? Just like the one we're standing on.
Look for snakes. That's what I don't like about it.
Snakes are fun. Huh, Hannah? So anyway, let's make our way. What we wanted to do next after finding this site is we wanted to find that monument out there, and we pretty much knew it wasn't going to be easy. But if we could get up on the right hill and up high enough, we were pretty sure that monument was going to stick out like a sore thumb, and it did. Anyhow, the square monument's got 2 meanings, or the square symbol, if you will. And when it comes to the Spanish, it can mean 90 degrees, or it can mean cash. And so you take a note of those 2 things, you know, 90 degrees, cash, and the distance to that little square monument. Not much more you can do here. Now, if you followed this in a perfect straight line off the turtle's head, it goes right through that little square monument and ends up at the monument that we're going to go to next. We will likely not go up to the North Reference Monument, just because we got to do an awful lot of cross country to get to it.
Now, there were another monument this way, right?
No. Well, the main monument by the freeway.
There, which in my mind is the Spanish are coming down. They see that monument and they know, because because of their verbal or whatever instructions, or because they're the owner, they know this is where they need to turn to come to
Well,
find the layout.
Yes, the first thing they notice is the monument, okay? They're going to go to that monument and find the information that's built into the monument that tells them what to do next. And when the camera shut off, I'm going to tell you what that was.
Isn't there a sight window in that one?
No,
So it's that one's the one that looks back at the slope, or which one is that?
this one does.
Okay.
The tall one way out there.
So we think that one is looking towards the mines.
Well, I know it is.
Okay. Well, we went over there.
The turtle's head points right at it. The sight window points right at it.
Well, that makes.
In other words, that monument really doesn't have anything to do with this configuration other than the fact that it occupies the corner.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Now I want to show you how the compasses work here. If you had 3 guys standing on this hill holding compasses, they'd all have a different north. Right now, that's pretty much pointing north. See what happens. There should be other places that are just like that.
Why does it do that?
Because there's, what do they call it? They call it lodestone, but it's magnetic.
Kryptonite.
Oh, lodestone.
Yes, kryptonite. But up on the hill that we're going to go to, I didn't bring my other compass, but I was actually going to bring both compasses and have 2 guys go up there and stand and have them point to north. So to show you.
Huh?
But yeah, and when we first discovered that, we kind of read something into it. You know, that it might be an intentional thing and designed to give you a correct bearing, you know. And later it just got too crazy, sounded way too Kenworthy, and we finally dropped it. So there you go.
So what do you mean by Kenworthy?
Okay, we need to explain that. I hate you for this. Kenworthy, Charles Kenworthy is a guy who came out with several treasure books, okay? And I remember people telling me, oh, you've got to get his books, you got to get his books. So I found 3 of them, and I ordered them from one supplier. And I remember the day they came into the post office, I went in, opened up my mailbox, and there was those 3 books, and I was so excited. I sat down and I went through every one of them, sitting there in the post office. And when I got done, I took all 3 of them and dropped them in the waste paper basket and left. And the reason being is, number one, the theories that he has in his books, there's absolutely no foundation to it whatsoever, except for what he says. He says that he found this information in the archives. Well, I know a lot of people that's been to the archives, and I know awful lot of people that's done a whole lot more than he has, and I'm telling you, it doesn't exist. And so basically, what's been created as a result of Kenworthy's books and another guy that I can't think of his name, is we got people now going out to the deserts, and any rock formation that they see, they read something into it, okay? Like this rock over here, I'm not very good at this stuff, but you know, I could sit here and say, well, that's an iguana's head. You know, well, show me where in the Spanish lore and in the Spanish signs and symbols that an iguana exists. Where does, I mean, a turtle's the only thing I've ever heard of. Yeah. And that, the turtle, comes from the Aztec. The Spanish knew that the turtle is going to lead back and forth from Aztlan, or Turtle Island, okay? There are no rabbits, there are no lizards, there are no bunnies, there's no tree formations that looks like a bunny or a dog or a royal poodle. It doesn't exist. It amounts to nothing more than your imagination. But this is why I have adopted the word Kenworthy, because it's a lot better than saying pareidolia or crazy.
Okay, got it.
So there you go. This one you can see from there. In fact, that's how I found it. But boy, I had to stand there and I was looking down, and all of a sudden I seen this dark spot, and I got the binoculars out and I said, that's where we need to go. Okay, now if you remember right at the last monument site, I said that if you follow that turtle's head, and I do mean precisely because we use survey equipment, the next thing that you're going to run into after the little square monument is that little monument right over there. And you can't even tell it's a monument.
You're on this knoll?
Huh? Yeah, the one on the right. And that thing puzzled us for years. We just couldn't figure out what it was, what it had to do with all of this, especially when you've got this sitting here staring you in the face. Why would you even mess with it? Well, if it wasn't there, that would cut out one side of the triangulation, okay? Because when you get to that one, you'll read about it in the description. But that's where you first implement the information that you got from there. Okay.
Time out. What story? What description?
It's kind of sort of hidden into Scoro.com.
Okay.
But all you got to do is use the search function, Rule of Martillo.
Okay.
There you go.
Isn't it also in one of your books?
It's also in the triple volume set to Scoro.com, the expanded versions of the articles. Joshua, can you tell me why this is a turtle?
It's not one of the taller monuments. It's one of the more bigger, rounder ones, and it's got the...
Nope, size has nothing to do with
Oh, I
it.
think that's the tail.
That would be the head.
Found the head.
Yeah. Now go to the other side and see if you can validate it.
Don't knock over my turtle.
Keep in mind, some of those rocks have fallen. The big one is still there. Notice that same shape, that
Yeah.
V shape. Now, one thing I noticed about this monument that I still haven't figured out, I'm pretty sure it was intended, but was it intended to affix the pointer stone that exists in the monument? Could have been, but notice these rocks perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There used to be the same thing back here, but
Same
one
thing over
day
there.
One day I think I stepped on the turtle's tail and they fell down. But here's the thing that I noticed about this monument, and I fully expected it to be here. Just take a look at the top of this. See anything unusual?
That one?
Yeah. A nice little arrow pointing off in that direction.
Yeah.
But what gives you that, what gives it to you more than anything is the fact that if you line that up and the turtle's head, okay, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's going to be 30 degrees. What does that imply?
3.
Well, if you understand the rule of Martillo, you can see that you're standing in a 3, 4, 5 triangle. You're standing at the corner that's 30 degrees. Okay, once we learn the rule of Martillo, we notice that the arrow, which points to the cache, okay, it's in direct line with this, somewhere out there. Then you have the turtle's head, which is 30 degrees off this direction. Now you have to implement the rule of Martillo, which will get you to that single point, okay? You follow? Mm-hmm. Okay, turtle's head, turtle's tail.
Pointer rock.
Notice there's no legs, unless you put your Kenworthy glasses on. Now the monument up there, even though that one up there, Joshua,
Yes.
is this tall and maybe that big around, it still has a nice, beautiful turtle's head and a tail.
You can see that one from the first one. Barely.
You can see it from the first location, you can see it from this location, you can see it for the location that's over that hill.
Are you talking about the big one on the skyline?
Yeah, because when we
Yeah.
were looking for this one over there, that's the one I thought we were looking at.
Oh, I know.
Orange.
But that standing at that location's how I found this one. I could see this one
Oh, so
from
you
there.
did the same thing. You skipped this one and went to that one?
No, we went around looking for that monument and we found another monument. So we went up to it. Then we traveled up and over the top of the mountain looking for that one and come over a hill, and there it was. Once we got to that one, we spotted this one. And I said, guys, that's the one I want, because it's in the middle of the triangle.
So the way this maps out is that's the beginning and that's the end?
That's the beginning, and you go there. You don't have to go to the one over here. The only reason it's there in my mind is to mark the corner of a cache configuration. Okay?
Yeah.
But
So why does this point that way, that pointer rock?
because that's where the cache is. It's right in line with it. This is called the actual course, okay? Or excuse me, in the rule of Martillo, this is called the intended course. The turtle's head is the actual course. In other words, in order for you to get to where you intend to go, you have to navigate this using the rule of Martillo. So you have to follow the turtle's head. You have to know what the alargar is. In the direction of the turtle's head should be the alargar. Do you see anything? It ain't that one. It's going to be in a direct line with the turtle's head. No, it's not even here.
Oh, it explains it.
That's when I quit looking at all these rocks out here saying, no, this can't be it. And so we scrapped it all and went and started all over and started gathering our information. We have a turtle. It's pointing to whatever the degrees is that takes you to that monument. We have a square monument, which means cache and 90 degrees. And we know that the distance from that square monument to the turtle's head was 280 yards, I think. So once you get to that monument, what do? How about we turn 90 degrees? How far should we go? How about 280 yards? Now what do? Nothing else you can do. Put a stake in the ground. Now, we're going to travel over here because we can see this big monument over here. It's pretty obvious.
Right,
We're now familiar with the rule of Martillo.
right.
So you get over here, same thing. What do we do now? Well, how about we navigate this thing? Okay? You follow the actual course. How far? Until you get to the alargar distance, which is 280 yards off of the intended course. Does that make sense?
Yes, which is the line off of that one over there, right?
It's a line off of this. That's the intended course.
The course this way, but you go as far as the line across.
You travel 30 degrees off of that one
Right,
until you get to a perpendicular distance equal to the alargar.
right. Which that's what I'm talking about. That perpendicular distance
Right.
is the one from there to there.
Once you get to that point where you are 280 yards from the intended course line,
Yes.
perpendicular, from that point, what do?
Get your LiDAR out.
Dig a hole.
How about turn 90 degrees?
Okay. But
And
there's
you-
not going to be a marker there, right? You just
No.
have to turn 90 degrees.
Exactly. And at that point, you travel back to the intended course. Now the two lines meet. What should be at that point?
Cache.
You would think it'd be the cache, but that's the intended point that you need to come to implement the final instruction, which we don't know. We kind of suspected that it can't be at that one given spot, and that's because of all the privateers. You know, they all know how to use the rule of Martillo. That means anybody could, that's like giving everybody a combination to your safe. So we knew there had to be one final instruction. But unfortunately, we don't know what that is. And it won't be that far away. If we got our compasses out and we're standing here, this is where the three guys were standing when I said,
In the
somebody, I need a north.
Right.
And I looked up and they're all three pointing in different directions. And then the same guys, I mean, and I fell for it too. They're all up here and they're standing on this and they're looking at the arrow on top and they go, I don't know, I think it's pointing at that. And the other guy, oh no, I think it's pointing over there. And I said, guys, do you see what you're doing? If you can't figure out what it's pointing out, what makes you think the Spanish could? It's to put you in the general direction. Now, if you did actually pull out a compass and use it in conjunction with the artificial north, because you can't use a compass here, you're going to find that it starts hitting 33 degrees, 333 degrees, or 303 degrees. That's how you know you're on the right track. It's when you start hitting the threes.
Doesn't this point
Probably want to double check if
go over that cliff
they never did that.
on that
You could actually.
ridge right there?
If you-
on the cliff.
If you find a monument that's got an arrow on top of it, and a turtle's head at 30 and even 60 degrees, it's going to be one of the two. Never seen one at 90. Chances are that where you're heading is within sight. Okay? If it was up and over the hill, you're not close enough yet to implement any rule of Martillo.
If you look further west, past that big monument out there at all?
Yes,
Nothing?
there's over 60 monument sites way over on that next mountain.
Could this possibly be telling them the course of travel back to a mine or something?
Not when the turtles' heads are pointed this way.
Well, they're going to Mexico when they're going that way.
Because why would you just use these as travel markers through here when you could go use the
Easily
valley?
you could look at the peaks
Yeah,
through
and
here.
just-
There's no reason.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, unless, well, I was going to say unless an unchartered expedition was going and they were following clues on a map or to get them back, but they could still say, well, you could see Mount, Baldy or whatever they call
And
it.
they would use the sailor's north. They'd use the North Star. They wouldn't even use magnetic north. So then you've got a 10-degree difference right off the bat if you're using a magnetic compass anyway.
Right. Yeah, they would actually use their sextant or whatever.
Yes.
It is that they,
So your magnetic north and their north would still be 10 degrees off.
Yeah.
You could come up with probably a dozen different things that these monuments could be, okay? But when it all comes down to it, why were the Spanish here?
and they were these are trying.
It's a four-letter
Right.
word, and
there's
it's
too much math
shiny.
involved for just
And those little square monuments, I mean, what do they mean? They wouldn't just put them out
No. In every single mining district area, I don't know what else to call them, that the Spanish had, there's going to be a depository. There has to be.
Oh yeah.
Because they're not going to bring it all the way from Jose's mining area and bring it over to Bernardo's mining
It
area.
would be interesting to know if the Spanish had pack trains going 24/7s and they had people stationed at certain locations that the owners of the mines would have hired to sit there to meet the pack trains
Or
and
change horses or
and
whatever.
change horses, or kind of like Lost Marias.
But if they did that, Rick, you'd have a really nice path in here.
They might have done.
It's possible, but my personal feeling is that they would cache everything up in one location, left with guards, and when they were done, okay, they'd come and mine for 3-4 years. We know Antonio de Espejo mined for 4 years. When they were ready to go back, that's when I think they'd do a mule count, find out exactly what they could take. They'd load up, take everything they can, whatever's left behind, that's their cash. And it's there to bargain with the
These-
next expedition that comes out.
These sites were probably rogue mining sites, is my opinion.
Is what?
Rogue. In other words, they were not
Privateers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
known to Spain. They probably weren't paying their fifth, or if they were, Spain didn't know where, because we don't have a record of any of the important people saying that this was a mining district.
Not yet, we haven't.
Maybe they exist.
Well, we know they were up above Fillmore. We know they were up mining up above Kanosh. We know they were up in Marysvale.
The only reason we know they were in the
Why
US
haven't we
is the
found any information regarding those?
It's in their history.
Yeah, the Utes
Daddy.
themselves have told on the Spanish from the Uintas. Of course, we see their signs and symbols.
And some of the early Mormons saw them coming out of the
yeah,
back
they
of there
saw them
too.
coming out of.
Yeah, my ancestor was
Canyon and
one of them that ran into him going up the Fillmore Trail.
And if these were going to be just trail markers, you'd think you'd have maybe one in between.
And
So
you
it's
would be able
easier.
to see with your naked
Yeah.
eye the next.
Well,
You'd
there
have
is.
like one right here and then another one there. So
There's more out there.
oh, I know there's more, but I'm saying if this was just to be a road, like a path
Yeah.
for travel, for just the general public, you'd have more markers. They wouldn't be as far out. There wouldn't be as much math involved.
See, and I think the path itself would be evidence enough for me to where to go. How do you think that road got over there? They're following an old path. Once you brought through 200, 300 mules and God knows how many Spaniards, you're going to have a pretty good path, and it's not going to be too hard to find when you go back.
So where we're at right now, with all of our lines and what we think, say you had a 1,000-yard circle to draw around where you think it is, where would that be?
Why don't we just drive over there? Because I want to show you something that Rick showed me the first time he came to this site. I mean, he's just walking along and he says, hey, right there. I said, what? And he said, someone's dug there before. Where? He said, right there. I said, what makes you think that? He says, I'm an anthropologist. I've been out on a lot of digs. Somebody's dug there before.
The vegetation was different.
You think you can find it again? I know I can.
In the right path. It's just right off this ridge right there. Isn't it?
I know where you pointed.
I hope you can,
Yeah,
Rick,
right
because
down
you're
there.
the only one that came out here with
I know exactly where it was.
You know, every time Dan sends me to something to look at it,
He
I
finds
get lost
something
and
else.
I find something else, and he's like, "Hey, this, like that monument."
And it adds more to the story.
Went into the wrong canyon, and there's a giant monument with a most perfect cool sight window pointing right up into the.
Had two sight windows in it, both pointing, looking at the exact same
spot.
point. You had to come up about 5 foot 6 inches to see through one, and then the other one you dropped down and it was angled
They're
a little
both
different.
angled as the
The
trans-
turtle's head's pointing exactly at the same thing. Let's go over there, get a closer look at that smaller monument, and I'll show you where we dug a 20-foot hole twice.
Did you guys take a 2-box or something over there, or what did you take over there?
Nothing, because we knew there wasn't anything that would go deep enough. We know it's in a cavern. You know how we know that?
Yeah.
You remember that show, what was it, Armageddon? And he said, how do you know that? And he says, well, Mr. Genius here landed us on an iron plate. You're standing on a lava field.
Yeah.
If you dig down, you're going to hit solid rock. There has to be a cavern. And the only way you're going to spot a cavern is these hills, like what we're standing on, like that one
You need
there.
to fly it with a drone with some infrared on it.
Exactly. Thermal imaging. That's where we're going to go next.
Okay.
And that's where the cache should be. And you know what? Even if we did find it, the cavern, if it's there, and we find the intended cache, assuming that this is all true and correct, there might not be a damn thing there.